I absolutely think that in the context of the subcontinent, there is a certain space for discussions about gender and sexuality that is not accorded to caste. And I think that the reasons for that also have to do with the visibility and the representation and the fight of elite queer people to create that space within elite circles. But the ways in which caste and class interplay with each other mean that the elite circles are very, very homogeneous in terms of their Savarna dominant caste composition, and they have no interest and no notion of liberating not just society but themselves from this sort of very problematic and oppressive framework of caste patriarchy. The question of trans victimization is a difficult one because there is a sort of accepted way, especially in sort of a Brahminically, patriarchally structured society, of putting forward your case as a group that faces any form of victimization, right? So you are victimized by society, and society does not accept the fact that you face exclusion unless you frame it in a victimized narrative. And so people have, I think, different strategies for how they can cope with that. And so when trans people feel coerced by this structure to adopt a narrative of victimhood, it's not something that I would judge. At the same time, I think that it's important that the narratives of people who don't choose to see themselves as victims, I think it's really important that those narratives don't get suppressed. And that does happen sometimes, especially in the context of funded NGOs trying to make money off of trans victimization. And so I think that that's a very dangerous trend, and that is something that we need to combat. And I think the sort of combating of trans victimization has to happen at two levels. It's not just about, there are various forms of assertion against victimization. So for example, some of the traditional Hijra Havelis are very clear that they disagree with the way in which trans people are victimized, because they see themselves as living very dignified lives and as not needing intervention from society or from the state. So in their context, their victimization is coherent. Their sort of anti-victimization narrative is coherent in terms of saying, because they're not saying we are not victims but we want this, but they're saying we are not victims and we do not want anything. So their narrative around victimization and non-victimization is completely coherent. There's another way, a coherent narrative through which one can combat victimization, and that is to say that we aren't victims, right? But we do face exclusion, and we're not asking for people to start including us, right? And that in turn can go in one of two directions. Either you say, we're going to fight along with all of the marginalized people to say that we will together build a society that doesn't operate on the framework of exclusion and inclusion, but operates on sort of tearing down the structures of exclusion in the first place, and not sort of asking for inclusion into hierarchical structures. Another way that one can do this is to really radically question the structure, not from the perspective of just theory, but really from the perspective of lived experience that says how worthless, how problematic, and how inhumane the structures that are oppressive to everybody are. And I think that in the particular context of this country, science is something that is not necessarily associated with asking questions and being fearless and rejecting authority, but rather with the opposite. You sort of go into science because your parents tell you that science is more monetarily rewarding than, at least certainly than the humanities and social sciences, if not more than sort of engineering and commerce and I think that really influences the way in which science is both done and studied in the country. And so that very sort of Brahminical order that associates science, with a certain position in a hierarchy of academia, and simultaneously sort of slots science education within the realm of learning lots of information and not really asking questions about how things work in the world. I do think that leads to a predominance of conservatism instead of the opposite, which is what it should be if science were really taught, true to its spirit in the context of this country.